Today is October 27th, and welcome back, Canada, to It's a Wake-Up Call. I've picked 4 stories today, which I'll be focusing on, that I think affect every Canadian, and I take a look at them through different lenses, you could say. So let's take a little run at this, and thanks for coming back for the second edition. My first wake-up call today is pointing a finger at politicians. And it's a continuation of the Rob Ford issue, the Mayor of Toronto. I think most of us have been around long enough to know, who This Hour has 22 minutes, and the Margaret Delahunt character that was created by Mary Walsh many, many years ago. She's surprised many politicians. So for her to show up at Rob Ford's home shouldn't really surprise anybody. For Rob Ford, the Mayor of Toronto, to not know who she is, and I've seen the video. I never saw any sign of this 6-year-old daughter that Marg supposedly traumatized. At no point in the video do you see her. But for the mayor of the city of Toronto to then go into his home and phone the 911 to call the police was a total inappropriate use of the 911 system. That's a system that, that is an essential service and shouldn't be abused by high-level politicians, shouldn't be abused by anybody, let alone the mayor of the city, who then uses his position to denigrate the 911 operators for not responding quick enough. That's just ridiculous. If anything is going to traumatize a 6-year-old, it's watching her father rant and rave on the phone at somebody using very inappropriate language that shouldn't be used around children at all. Anyway, so that's my first Wake Up Canada, or Wake Up Call to Canada. Take a look at the types of politicians we're starting to elect. It's friggin' scary. And Mr. Ford, with your current popularity rating, I suggest you develop a sense of humor, because you're going to need one. I've always had the greatest respect for Sheila Fraser and her role as Auditor General. To me, she was one of the most transparent and accountable people left on Parliament Hill, and handled her position with a great deal of professionalism. So I was really quite saddened when she retired at the end of June. That position needs to be seen as unbiased, independent, and accountable. I think the Harper government has really hampered the position with their current nomination. The Harper government has recently announced the nomination of Michael Ferguson as the new federal Auditor General. When they presented his resume to the House, they skipped the fact that he's not bilingual. Unfortunately, that position requires a bilingual individual, but Mr. Harper has decided he doesn't have to adhere to this. He got support from Citizen and Immigration Minister Jason Kenney, who described Mr. Ferguson as the most worthy candidate of all the candidates they looked at. Well, their pool must have been pretty shallow if they couldn't find a bilingual accountant, who met all the rest of the criteria. To me, this smacks of another patronage appointment, and that scares me, because the Attorney General, the Auditor General, really needs to be able to be perceived as being open, transparent, and nonpartisan. The process we're going through right now to appoint him, I think, is going to create a lame duck in a position that up until this point had been beyond reproach. I don't know how much longer we can say that. So wake up, Canada, take a look at what's going on there, and see, is this really the type of government we want representing us? Because in reality, they're not representing us, they're representing themselves. We've become secondary. Citizens of Canada have become secondary to this government. Here's another wake-up call for everybody. It really doesn't matter anymore what province you live in. I'm an Albertan. This particular story affects Alberta. It was in the paper this morning. The new Royal Alberta Museum in downtown Edmonton has been put on hold indefinitely after the province announced that Ottawa has pulled $92 million in funding. Okay, there's some little bit of controversy over the funding. Later on in the article, it does go on to say that Conservative MP for Edmonton Millwoods Beaumont, Mike Lake, twittered the commitment from the federal government is $30 million. He doesn't say if it still stands, just that it was $30 million. So there's a mix-up on amounts. And $92 million, $30 million, I mean, there's a big difference, but still, it was a $340 million project. That funding has now been pulled, so it's not like Alberta gets everything at once. I live out here. I see just as much happening in the name of austerity here as any place else. Was it anti-Alberta? I doubt it. It's, from my opinion, it's more anti-culture. This was a museum they were building after all, so Bruce Carson could run around building all types of little museums dedicated to the oil patch, but God forbid we should build a real museum as a way of revitalizing downtown Edmonton. So, rest of Canada, we're just as subject to getting jerked around as the rest of us. So, wake up call. You're not alone. Here's a continuation of a little article I mentioned yesterday in Wake Up Call. And it goes back to taxpayers' dollars being used to defend this government's position whenever there's a constitutional challenge. Some time ago, Canada's Privacy Commissioner, Jennifer Stoddart, said she had some deep concerns about potential legislation that would boost police surveillance powers and access to private information. Those were all in regards to Bills C-50, C-51, and C-52, which would impact our privacy rights. And I agree with that, because shortly thereafter I read another story about the 65-year-old woman that was refused entrance to the States because they had it in their computer system that she'd made police have been called to an attempted suicide 6 years beforehand. I don't see how a 65-year-old woman who made a minor suicide attempt 6 years ago would constitute a threat to the states, and why they even have that information. That information is supposed to be protected. All three of these bills have now been rolled over into the omnibus bill. I would bet dollars to donuts there's going to be a constitutional challenge on all three aspects of that. In fact, there's going to be challenges on numerous aspects of the omnibus bill if you really take a look at it. Again, it's taxpayers' dollars that are going to go to pay for the court challenges that are going to come out of this omnibus bill. So we are paying to defend an ideologically based decision rather than what's good policy. These types of laws that they're talking about are moving us closer to being a police state. Our privacy is threatened, and we need to be aware of that. So here's another wake-up call. Pay attention to what's in that omnibus bill, because when you really break it down, it's quite scary, and it's a big step towards a police state rather than a full democracy. Wake up, people. This last little wake-up call is really based on my own experience, and so there's not going to be a story link below. But anybody that's followed me or knows of me knows that I had polio when I was 3 years old, so I've grown up with crutches, grown up with a disability. I did a lot of fighting in the 70s and 80s for social justice around access, rights. You know, even my own family, I found out recently, did not know that I didn't have the right to vote until 1982 with the introduction of the Charter. Polling stations could turn anybody with a disability away prior to that point. A bigger issue is physical access. I thought that had been dealt with in 1976 when they changed the National Building Code to ensure that physical access was addressed. They took that a step further in 1982 with the Charter, which spelled it out that access should not be an impairment to employment. That's why I've been really surprised lately. I decided about 8 months ago, it was a decision based on a number of things, but that I need to get back in the labor force for, I'm bored to tears, but also for financial reasons. As it turns out, I really can't afford to be retired. But so I started applying for jobs, a lot of jobs that I can do with my eyes closed. I mean, I've got 40 years of labor force experience, and I've had a wide variety of jobs. So 5 of the jobs I've applied for, and one of them was for a nonprofit that works with the disabled and has been in that same building for over 30 years, wasn't accessible. I didn't know that till I got there, and I hadn't thought to ask because I thought, okay, they work with the disabled, they'll be accessible. They weren't. And that's true of 4 other jobs I've applied for. The most recent one was with a placement agency. I have almost 20 years background in marketing, training, and human resources. I worked in human resources in the public sector with the province and the feds, with HRDC, and in the private sector. So I've got a fair amount of background in human resources, recruiting, this type of thing. So I was really surprised. And I applied for a position with a company that's been around for about 3 years. I was fairly impressed with the way they approach things. I looked at their website, and a few little issues there, but not a lot. I got a nice response back from them. Things were looking fairly positive, and then it just stopped. So I drove past there on Saturday because their office isn't far from my place. Well, now I see why I'm not hearing back from them. They're in a building that's, it's an older building, quaint building, but it's not accessible. If they've been in business for 3 years, you know, what kind of message is that sending? When somebody's that's looking for work that has a disability, they can't get in there. If I'm an employer and I want to use them for a service to hire people, I couldn't get in there. That would change my opinion on how I dealt with that company. So I see these little things being constantly eroded, and people don't realize that until they run into it. I've had more people with me when we're out walking around saying, wouldn't have thought of that. I wouldn't have. Well, you know, I think about it every day because I deal with it every day. But when lack of accessibility starts getting in my way of finding employment, I'm getting pissed off. So this is my wake-up call. Wake up, Canada. They're eroding things, and you're not even aware of it. Thanks. Have a good day. Just one man's opinion.